This episode is brought to you by KPMG. Making an impact is how KPMG helps make the difference. KPMG applies advanced tools and strategic thinking to convert data into actionable knowledge and deliver value by improving performance through transformation, modernizing processes with technology, harnessing the power of data, navigating complex M&A transactions, and enhancing trust among stakeholders. Go to kpmg.us/advisory to learn more. KPMG. Make the difference.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
The Judge Jeanine Pirro, Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday Morning Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, everybody. And I want to tell you real quick before we bring in Joh Solomon to tell you that the Tunnel to Towers Foundation Walk Run is coming up on Sunday, September 28th. That's just 2 weeks from now. All of us here at Red Apple Audio Networks are encouraging our listeners to donate to our team. Please go to redappleaudionetworks.com/walk to donate. Please help us raise the most money for the amazing Tunnel to Towers Foundation Walk Run. Let us never forget America's heroes and what they do for us. Let's raise some money, please, for our veterans, for our first responders, and 9/11 victims. That's redappleaudionetworks.com/walk. Remember, every dollar counts. Okay, let's bring in the aforementioned Joh Solomon, my former boss at another place at another time when we did TV, when it wasn't really cool to do TV online. And now, of course, Joh can be followed at Joh Solomon Reports. He's an award-winning investigative journalist and the founder of Just the News. He's only worked at AP, Washington Post, The Hill, his current venture, a lot on the resume and a lot of success. Joh, welcome. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday morning.
Yeah, good to be with you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I asked David Webb, who was on with me a few minutes ago, and I'll ask the same question because everybody's going to have a different perspective on this. What first went through your mind when you heard that Charlie was shot? Or if you, unfortunately, in my case, I was sent the video and I clicked on it to watch it, and it was just one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen because you knew that he probably wasn't going to survive that. So your initial reaction, Joh, and then what you think overall of the media coverage since then, where, again, I don't want to paint the entire legacy left-wing media as being completely responsible here, but there are enough bad apples to choose from, and I just can't believe that even after something like this, that we couldn't have some measured analysis. No, they went right to the political stuff and pointing fingers and even trying to portray the shooter as somebody who is MAGA, which is utterly ridiculous. But again, I give you the floor. Lots to say here, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, first, when I heard it and then saw it, I knew something was tragic yet again. Here we go again. We've had this spate of violence. We've moved from first debating people to then trying to cancel them on Twitter and censor them, then debank them, then prosecute them, and now apparently that's not enough, so we're trying to kill people. And that's the first thought I had. We're in that vicious cycle, and this feels like this may be another example of it. And then, of course, very quickly afterwards, we were first to report that Charlie had passed, and you just begin to go through that process. I had just been with him 3 weeks ago. I was one of his keynote speakers alongside of Scott Jennings at his event in Colorado. I got some really great quality time with him, and just appreciate all that he does and his commitment to free speech. I mean, more than anything else, he believed that the way we solve this problem is not with less speech, but with more speech, just having civil debates. And someone found that a threat and obviously killed him to keep him from continuing to do it. So it's hard to see. The media's coverage, well, at the beginning it was just classic. You jump in and you're trying to cover, figure out what's going on. And then very quickly, those who have opinion as their goal on the left, I think discredited themselves and dishonored themselves with some really horrible displays, particularly MSNBC, but other places as well. I think factually, most people have tried to stay, even in the legacy media, on the factual side. When you get to the opinion side and the social media side, you see so much hatred, whether it's government employees, teachers, people just saying things that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I can't imagine people would feel comfortable saying. No filter, no humanity, purely just evil comments. And I think that's the world we lived in. We've boiled the water for so long. We've demonized our enemies so long, particularly on the left. that people don't even realize what they look like when they say these horrible things. And they look terrible to the rest of us, but to themselves, they don't seem to appreciate the lack of humanity or the lack of dignity that they're displaying with those comments. And I think that that's a really, really big issue in society right now. We got to take the temperature of water down. I said this on Hannity the other night. We have created a 3-burner hot stove. Education, the gaming world, which I think is going to turn out to be very important in this case, and social media. And those 3 spots, we're constantly poisoning young people with this hatred and intolerance. And we've boiled their water to a point that more and more people feel comfortable stepping in and shooting someone rather than having a debate with them.
Wow. And we're talking to Joh Solomon. I think you're so right about that 3-burner stove you just described, education, gaming, social media. On the last part of that, social media, I think when people really see when things really begin to band a divide in this country, and I brought up the example of 9/11 before, and George W. Bush at Yankee Stadium, and then the thunderous applause for him when he walked onto the field. That got even louder when he threw a perfect strike. You could argue that was the highlight of his presidency, and the country truly came together. And now we see, like time and again, during situations where you think we'd see like almost total unity, and instead, again, the social media aspect of this, I think since that became huge, we'll call it about 10 years ago, when Twitter particularly really took off, then suddenly we see politicians completely like just take Eric Swalwell. If you look at his account all day, it is just constant snark and attacks, personal, nothing ever to do with policy. Nothing like, here's what I'm proposing to make your world better. And I think that, AOC and Adam Schiff, and I could go Governor Walz of Minnesota, who literally just 2 weeks ago was saying that he hoped he woke up to hear news that Donald Trump was dead. I mean, this is insane stuff. And I don't see how we reverse it, John. I don't see how, if something like this didn't give people like pause, those kind of people, then I think that this is the new normal, and that's a dangerous place to be.
It is. Listen, I think you saw it after Trump's first and second assassination attempt after the election, and now with this Charlie Kirk episode, someone on the left has to stand up and repudiate this behavior and say, I won't be part of the Democratic Party, I'm walking out, and then another person follow him and another person follow him. If that does not happen, you're right, it's going to become the norm, and there will be no taking this temperature down, because all the left will have is this constant barrage of hatred. I mean, I just look at some of these comments, and these are like really significant people who work for the Secret Service, people who work for government agencies, the people who are teachers responsible for taking the tender minds of children and educating them, and they're saying things that are beyond comprehension in terms of their evil and meanness. And I think we gotta have a movement soon where people say, you know what, I won't belong to this movement any longer until it stops. And if that and that means corporations, donors, advertisers. We saw a little bit of progress with anti-Semitism after October 7th, and I think that sort of movement that has started to quiet anti-Semitism on college campuses now must be applied to the political left, and we must cause a financial and social consequence to people who are talking this way, or it will be normalized. We're very close to that edge of where it's going to become the normal.
You know what I can't get over, John? You mentioned the type of professions of people who openly celebrated the execution of a father of 2 and a husband who's only 31 years old because he, had different beliefs than them, and he actually engaged in debate. I mean, it's just amazing. But, I mean, how could these people be so stupid? Like, if you are a professor or a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer, or people who spend a lot of money probably on their education to get where they are, to go online and do something like that. We had a situation here in New Jersey where a nurse heard a doctor celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, like lively, like, wow, he had what was coming to him, basically saying, like, openly, where patients could hear this guy. And the nurse confronted him and said, you shouldn't do that. This is a horrible example. And then apparently the nurse got fired because the doctor then reported her for harassing him or something. The fact that these people don't understand, you're going to lose your job because you're going to get reported. Someone's going to see what you're saying, and they continue to do it. I just find it remarkable. I made this comment also on Hannity, I believe, this week when Charlie passed, and I agree with President Trump, and this may be almost a rhetorical question, but I honestly believe, John, that at age 31, if Charlie Kirk 15 years from now, if he did what he did in 13 years since he was 18 years old and founded Turning Point USA, give him another 15, and let's see where this movement is and how big he would become. That's a presidential candidate, and probably a winning presidential candidate, because he had the look, he had the talent, the tools, he understood. Now, there's a performance aspect to running for president, as we know, whether it's Barack Obama or whether it's Donald Trump, and he knew that, but he was also a man of principle, a man of faith, and unwavering morals. So I think he could have been like the 50th, 51st president.
That's why people were so concerned on the left with him, and why someone felt it his job to silence him with a bullet. And it is remarkable how skilled he was. He had an intellect, and yet he was compassionate. He had a faith about him, and yet he also was willing to be in the secular world and have an honest debate about where we are. And we need more people. If this assassin thought that they were going to silence this movement, all they did with their shooting is make sure that more and more people, there are chapters all across the country now being stood up on college campuses where there were no Turning Point USA things. The money flowing in is extraordinary. I had people come up to me on the street in the last few days saying, you know what, I'm a young person, I'm joining TPUSA. So whatever this assassin's intention was, he failed, because he's now girded and steeled more people, including people who weren't political a few days ago, to jump into this fire and say, if this is as bad as it's got, I'm standing on the other side of it. And that is a really great first positive step. The second step that has to happen is someone in the Democratic movement, in the left side of America, has to stand up and say, I can't be part of this anymore. I quit until you fix this. And then someone has to follow him, and then another person. If that does not happen, I don't think we're going to see any reduction in this, and I fear that there are many other Tyler Robinsons out there that can be wound up and called into action, because they don't see a human anymore. When they look at their opponent, they don't see a human. They see an avatar that they were trained to hate in a video game, and that is a dangerous, amoral moment to be in American history.
You're so right. They see an avatar. That's so well put. We're talking to Joh Solomon of Just the News. JustTheNews.com is where you can get the breaking news that John, every day it seems like they're ahead of the curve. No question about it. I'm going to ask this question. It's a two-parter again. Do you fear for your own safety? Because you do a lot of events. I do, but I'm not you. I don't see me being terribly high on the food chain as far as like we got to take out Concha. But you're pretty prominent, and you do events like you did just with Charlie a couple of weeks ago and Scott Jennings. You have a story on JustTheNews.com. The headline is, after Kirk assassination, political left social media post lists next targets, and they include, and this is thousands of posts, right? Joe Rogan, J.K. Rowling, she's the Harry Potter author, of course. Ben Shapiro, big name, basically like a slightly older Charlie Kirk, and Matt Walsh, among others. So, I mean, the thing is, if you're a government official, if you're Trump, right, not so much as a candidate, but now as the president, I was at Trump National last night where Trump was. It was for an education charity event, but I mean, the security was overwhelming. You had to go with like 5 layers just to get onto the property. People like you, people like Charlie, people like Ben Shapiro, you're basically soft targets, because you have security, but you don't have that level. So I just wonder, like, do you almost fear doing public events at this point?
I don't, but it should be on of our back of our heads to be even more aware of our surroundings and look for unusual circumstances. Are you ever going to see a shooter on a rooftop 200 yards away? No, right? And I think that is maybe one of the goals here, which is to instill that fear, maybe not even in the people who are speaking, but in the campuses and universities that host these events. And one of the big fears, and Tommy Tuberville, the senator, was on my show the other day, and he said, I fear that universities and venues are going to stop hosting these events purely for the liability issue. And that may be what these radicalized, crazed killers are thinking about, creating a dynamic that one way or the other we're going to sound, so we don't kill you, maybe we'll just get the event locales to stop hosting these events. I think we have to step into the void, just like we did after 9/11, and say we're not afraid. We went back to a baseball game 2 days later. We went back to work a couple of days later. We have to do that. We need to improve the security practices as best we can. But I think more than anything else, we have to confront this culture that has literally festered up in ways that I could not possibly imagine even 5 or 10 years ago. And it is with the elected leaders of the Democratic Party. It has to start there. They have to stop the demonization that they're doing. They did not do it after Trump's first and second assassination attempts. They have not yet done it after Charlie Kirk. But there are forces beyond the leadership of the Democratic Party that can apply this pressure. It could be the donor world. It can be the corporate world. It could be the television world. What if news stations just said, you know what, based on what you say, I'm not bringing you on my television. I'm all for free speech. But at the moment you advocate for the death of a person, you have crossed the line. That is not protected speech. That is hate speech. The courts are clear about it. And I think a few prosecutions or a few defunding, much like we saw in the aftermath of aftermath of October 7th in the counter anti-Semitism movement, which I thought really was effective. We need to create that same movement here. Maybe the government has to start it, but private sector has to do it. If you see a politician and they said something, don't invite him to speak at your next party. Cancel the event. If you've been donating, pull back your donation. There are ways for everyday Americans to stop this. I'm not saying don't be a Democrat. I'm saying repudiate this behavior before it becomes the norm.
Indeed. And we're talking to Joh Solomon of justthenews.com. As an example of not inviting back people who say provocative things, Jasmine Crockett is basically the new face of the Democratic Party. She's replaced AOC, right? She's everywhere. And I'll play this clip for you guys if you want to cue it up. It's cut 8. This is Jasmine Crockett basically making an argument that, only white supremacists commit all the crimes in this country. Nope, she really said it. Cut 8, go.
And if you really want to know who the criminals are in this country, you can Google it. You don't have to trust me. But the people that commit 80% of the most violent crimes in this country are white supremacists. Yet for whatever reason, they sit and they serve at the pleasure of the president. They are the ones that were there on January 6th, tearing our democracy down physically. And now we have them tearing us down right here from within.
Yep, she said that on an interview about Charlie Kirk, white supremacists. But she's going to keep getting invited back, John, because the formula is if you keep saying provocative things, it goes viral. So the idiots that run cable news stations like CNN and MSNBC say, let's put her on because she's causing a buzz, even though it ruins their credibility and there's no factual basis for what she's saying.
It is time for people who watch those stations to cancel their cable contracts. It's time for those who advertise on those networks to defund until they solve this problem. And it's time for Mike Johnson, as Speaker, to take a greater hold of the entire Congress and realize that there are behaviors that are fine. We may disagree with a lot of our political opinions, but a lot of this goes beyond political opinions. And they're going now to the effort of trying to instill hate in our political system. There has to be a repudiation at the political center. The Republican Party has been too cowardly, with the exception of President Trump and some of those who've been fighting anti-Semitism, to truly confront this, to truly punish it, to truly begin to create consequences for people like a Jasmine Crockett, who brings nothing valuable to the debate when she says things like that. There are plenty of valuable things that Jasmine Crockett could do today. Those sort of moments are not valuable. And in an earlier generation of politicians, she would have been sidelined and benched by her own party. But there are cowards in both parties today that aren't willing to step up and repudiate that behavior, and so they're normalizing it with their silence. And the death of Charlie Kirk is just one of many consequences of not confronting this more aggressively. We're going to get there. I feel like this week has been a turning point in that debate. But when we come back to Congress next week, will the Speaker of the House, will the Rules Committee do something to start to punish people who make these things? You can impose fines. These are not protected speech when you begin to suggest that the assassination of a person was warranted, or that falsely you're claiming that there's white supremacism behind Charlie Kirk's behavior. It's just not true, and there has to be a consequence for it somewhere, or we normalize it. We'll see. But there's a lot of cowardly behavior in Washington. This has been brewing for 2 or 3 years, and there are tepid efforts at repudiating it. There needs to be compelling efforts, and until there is, I think every day we're moving towards it. And I want to add another dynamic that, Joe, we don't think about. We're going to have an extraordinary story tomorrow. While we have our own left doing this, and while we have our own provocateurs in America, our enemies overseas, Cuba, Iran, Iran, Russia, and China, have been creating chapters in the United States right next to the college campuses to take young people and suck them into a movement. Maybe it's transgenderism or gay rights or Second Amendment rights, and they're weaponizing them in front of our eyes, just a few short miles from where Charlie Kirk was assassinated. We're going to have an amazing story about one group now, or we don't believe they're involved in the shooting.
Yeah,
but they are involved.
They're fueling it.
Weaponization of this, and they're directly tied to Cuba. The Trump administration gave them visas to go to Cuba earlier this year. I'm sorry. Why? And why should they have contacts with people? Why should they be advocating? Some of these groups, not the one we're writing about, are advocating for the release of terrorists and hailing them.
John.
But then again, we have a New York City mayor who's done something similar, or mayor or candidate. So
yeah, that may be mayor very soon. Hey, John, they're telling me they're giving me the hard break sign, as they say. So unfortunately, that's justthenews.com. You got to read that story tomorrow, guys, because there's a bigger reason behind all this, not just lone wolves. Joh Solomon, thanks so much for joining us on a Sunday morning. We'll talk again soon, my friend. All right, that's Joh Solomon. I'll be back with the Joe Concha Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday morning show. We'll wrap this puppy up in just a moment.
The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday morning show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.